Hello, and welcome once more to Denton's Tales. Now, you're a Norseman over 1,000 years ago, and you really want to annoy those pesky Anglo-Saxons. Oh, yes. You want to drive them round the bend, send them climbing up the walls in frustration. So, what do? Well, stay tuned and learn. We shall come to that shortly. Well, of course, it's little practical use to you today, being over 1,000 years too late, and, well, you're not a Norseman. There aren't any Anglo-Saxons to actually piss off. But it's a good story. Yes, it's a very good story, so let's run with it. But first, you know, the Vikings, as most people saw them, and many still continue to see them, never existed. No, despite their depiction in movies and television shows. Well, it's often about as accurate as a Neanderthal using an electric razor. A stereotypical image of them became reality, focusing on one aspect, just on one aspect, and not the most common aspect of their lives, an aspect that, well, some of them did, some of them didn't, and even most of those who did only did it from time to time. And they weren't even Vikings. No, they never called themselves Vikings. Nobody else ever called them Vikings because, well, there's very good reason for that, you see, they weren't. The aspect I refer to is, of course, raiding. Oh, yes, raiding, pillaging, burning, and raping, which very few Norsemen, as the Vikings should really be called, actually ever did on a regular basis. You know, many of them did it from time to time, yes. Some never did it at all, but very few did it as their sole occupation. They were far too busy being farmers, fishermen, blacksmiths, craftsmen, and so on. And as to a Viking, a term so often seen as almost a nationality, you know. Well, it was something that a Norseman could do by getting in a ship. Yes, you have to get in a ship, one of those things over there, and going a Viking. But he couldn't be a Viking. For the same reason, of course, no one can be a Viking today, contrary to what some people may claim. The myth of the horned helmet, of course, I think has been pretty much laid to rest, which is a very good thing. The only thing the Norse did with horns was to either blow them or drink out of them. But there is still far too great an emphasis on that one raiding aspect of the Norsemen. You know, their massive contribution to trade, culture, and knowledge of their world is still greatly overlooked, and they are still often seen as scruffy, unkept, and lacking in social graces. I mean, uncultured barbarians, if you like, which is actually the opposite of what they really were. You know, real Norse clothing, as opposed to television show Sons of Anarchy biker-style leather and mountains of fur, well, their clothing was just as refined and often as elegant as clothing anywhere else at their time, especially among the nobility, with beautifully embroidered tunics and the like, with women in the typical dress style of a long underdress with a shorter pinafore worn over it with their brooches. Very, very distinctive Scandinavian designs on them, and not the vaguely medieval attire seen in shows like Vikings or Vikings Valhalla, which well, they could be from anywhere in medieval Europe, anywhere except Scandinavia, as it happens, because they bear no resemblance to what Scandinavian women or men either would have been wearing. And the lower classes were not going around in filthy rags. Good heavens, no, they'd have been dressed in very clean, tidy, and functional garments in various colours. Oh yes, in colours, not the dismal brown or grey as so beloved by Hollywood and TV shows. The suggestion that the Norse were scruffy, unkept barbarians who probably smelled on a really hot day, with matted hair and primitive personal habits, if they had any personal habits at all, their culture a backwards and unenlightened one, well suited to the so-called Dark Ages, oh yes. Well, that particularly annoys me. In fact, they paid great attention to grooming and personal hygiene. Men took great care of their beards, and women would have done the same with their hair. One bit of evidence for that is the fact that COMBS, Yes, combs are among the most common grave items. Various types of combs, and one type of Norse comb, which I find extremely interesting, is still in everyday use today. Yes, now that might surprise you. Yes, what is known as a dust comb. And this is one here. This is exactly the same as many combs from the so-called Viking Age. The same shape, the same double row of teeth, the same curved end pieces. The only difference is that this is plastic rather than bone, and it's undecorated. You know, even one of its uses is the same now as it was then. It's great for catching fleas. Oh yes, and I use it on the cats, should they ever require it. Apart from the plethora of combs, I've seen little kits, I suppose you might call them. Iron rings with tweezers, an earwax removing tool, and a nail file on them. The Norse were probably the cleanest people of Europe in the early Middle Ages. I mean, they combed their hair and washed their hands and faces every day. And bathing once a week, the day that we know as Saturday, was known as Lorgalder, which means the pool or bath day. A weekly bath. God, I mean, that was an unheard of thing among other people, many of whom might bathe once a year, yes, or twice if they were really fussy about personal hygiene. And now we come to the bit that I'm sure you've been waiting for with bated breath, hardly concealed excitement: how to piss off the Anglo-Saxons. Yes, as I said, it won't really do you much good 1,000 years later, but anyway, it's an interesting thought. Norse cleanliness. Now that astonished the Anglo-Saxons. They were totally mystified by such strange and unnatural things. I mean, bathing once a week, changing your clothes off them, it all seemed a bit pointless. I mean, when you put them on, why take them off again the same week? On, off, on, off. It didn't make any sense at all. But it also annoyed the Anglo-Saxons because it had it had a sexual side to it. Yes, now you're getting interested, aren't you? Yes. There is an Anglo-Saxon account of them wanting to kill the Northmen. Oh yes, kill them because they were so clean and well-groomed. So clean and well-groomed, you see, that Saxon women were being attracted to them. Shock horror. I mean, the Saxons feared losing their women to the neat, tidy, and sort of odoriferous Northmen, which of course says a lot about the personal state of the Anglo-Saxons. And we have it on the authority of an English monk and chronicler named John of Wallingford. Now, he was writing in 1002 AD, just after the infamous St. Brice's Day massacre, when King Ethelred the Unready, rather foolishly, ordered an attack on Danes who were living quite peacefully in his kingdom, thus bringing rather considerable retaliation down on himself. But some of the Anglo-Saxons, of course, they were quite happy to kill the local Norsemen, not because the king thought it was a good idea, but because of the far greater Norse cleanliness, since some Saxon women were actually going off with them in preference to their own men. Well, I mean, you couldn't have that sort of thing going on now, could you? John of Wallingford wrote that the Norsemen, and I quote, caused much trouble to the natives of the land, for they were wont, after the fashion of their country, to comb their hair every day, to bathe every Saturday, to change their garments often, and set off their persons by many frivolous devices. In this manner they laid siege to the virtue of the married woman, and persuaded the daughters even of the nobles to be their concubines. Yes. Of course, the Anglo-Saxon men, I suppose, well, they really did have a remedy, didn't they? A very, very easy one when you think of it. A bar of soap and a tub of water, dunk yourself in it and come out smelling of roses, as the saying is, instead of being probably rather hard to be close to indoors on a hot day. A pungent body odor is a guaranteed passion killer. No, nothing is going to happen. As a contraceptive, well, it works very well, yes. Now, nothing did happen, we may infer from John of Wallingford's account. Now we come to another example of hygiene, euphemistically nicknamed the John, the bog, the loo, the convenience in parts of the United States, the chick sail, the latrine in medieval castles, the guardrobe in the US Navy, the head, here in Dublin, the jacks, or, in other words, the toilet. Now, it used to be thought that, while there were latrines and cesspits in the towns, of course, that out in the countryside people would do what nature called upon them to do, wherever they happened to be at the time, in the hedgerows, under a tree, in the field. Well, there's no need for any sanitary requirements with all that open country around you. Why would you bother? But, now we see, recently the remains of a proper covered latrine were discovered in what would have been the countryside back then, far from any town, probably out on a farm. There was a deep cesspit. It was very definitely a cesspit from the analysed contents of it. Oh, yes. And around it were post holes, showing that it had been contained in a wooden structure of some kind. Just another indicator of Old Norse cleanliness. Those Anglo-Saxon women, they knew a thing or two. Oh, yes, they certainly did. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that little look at the past, and until next time, I shall say goodbye for now.